Hi everyone, so my name is Sabrina Scott. Hello, you are here likely as a part of the CRASSH Magic and Ecology conference on the internet. So thank you so much for watching in advance. Hopefully you watch the whole video and hang out for some additional conversation. So I'm super excited to be invited, first of all, so a huge thank you to all the organizers, to Simone, to everyone else who made this happen. I'm also so honored and appreciative to be invited alongside so many fantastic, interesting, brilliant people, scholars, practitioners whose work I've admired for quite some time. So I'm just really excited to be here and as a part of this whole conversation. So just a little bit about me to get us rolling so you guys know who the hell it is that you're listening to and why you might want to listen to me. So, I have been practicing magic and witchcraft and tarot and all of that stuff for 20 years. I grew up in this fun thing called modern American spiritualism, which means that I went to my first seance like before I hit the double digits, so it's not how most folks grow up, and because of that, I got to see firsthand how certain forms of spirituality, magic, energy work, healing, messages, mediumship, how all of that stuff actually looks up close. And so that really dramatically shifted my worldview as a youngster. It dramatically influenced what I believed the world looked like, what I believed was possible. And a lot of those learnings and experiences I take with me to this day to inform my academic work as well as my existence as an artist and practitioner and teacher of magic and tarot. So that's a little bit about where I'm coming from a practitioner point of view. I'm not Wiccan a lot of the time. People confuse witchcraft with Wicca. They are totally not the same thing, though there is a shared history there. So do look into that if that's something that's of interest to you. It's not what I'm going to be talking about today. And a big part of my perspective is that I'm an animist. So I'm sure that every animist that you'll talk to will relate to this phrase and this term in a really different way. But for me, it means that when I was a kid and I saw someone throw a magazine across the room, I would feel really badly for the magazine and my heart would just go out to that object. And I don't really see that magazine as just an object. I see that magazine as a being, as an entity, as a friend, as a family member. That is very much my perspective, and I've always felt that way. I've always been very sensitive to the energy in the room, the lives and experiences and journeys of non-human beings. All of that stuff has always been really important to me and has influenced my trajectory when it comes to my philosophical explorations, which you can see some of that stuff behind. Philosophy over here, magic over here. There's more books up and below, so read way too many books. So you might actually as well jump into my academic background. So just so you guys have a bit of information about who I am, what I do, where I'm coming from. My undergraduate degree is in illustrations. I'm an artist and I did 3 minors. One of them was in digital and media studies, another was in communication design, and then the third, which was not quite finished, I think I had 2 courses left, was in printmaking. So that includes bookbinding, screen printing, all these really interesting ways of engaging with material. It's very fun. My master's is in environmental studies with a diploma in sustainability education. And so that was really where I started to merge my practice as a witch, as a magical person, as someone who is engaged in what I consider to be spirit contact, witchcraft, magic, all this type of stuff. I started to really merge that with what I understand to be ecology, with environmental thinking, with different branches of philosophy, which include but are not limited to stuff like horizontal ontology, agential realism, vitalist materialism, new materialism, stuff like this. That stuff, discovering that, I was like, damn, these people really understand a lot of what I've been trying to communicate for years, and they really put the words to what I felt my experiences were and have been as a magical person, as a magical practitioner, as someone who has always tried to be kind of tuned in with the energies around me. So, and so then I started to work on a PhD in History and Philosophy of Science, aka Science and Technology Studies, aka Science, Technology, and Society. And so that is where I'm spending my time now, doing work on a lot of this type of stuff. I won't get too into that. We will move along with the introduction, but that is very much where I locate my work, my interests, and the type of people that I'm thinking with and working with their ideas and their philosophies and their frameworks to understand my own experience, both as a human, but also just as someone who is engaged in the practice of magic in a very serious, literal, non-metaphorical, non-archetypal way. So when I'm talking about witchcraft and magic, I'm being very, very literal. Very, very literal. I'm not talking about witches as like a cute metaphor for like feminism or whatever. That is like not my thing at all. I do consider myself to be a feminist, but as a non-binary person, I've never really dug a kind of weird gender essentialism that I perceive to be dominating the conversation in a lot of those archetypal type of spaces. Not my scene. So right, so I was also talking about animism, and so for me, I actually don't work with different divinities. I'm someone who prefers to notice the energy and beingness of everything that's around me, whether that is, oh my god, a skyscraper, a pizza box, a tree, the cat that might pop into my video at some point. And so as I gained more words and academic theories to explain my own philosophies on magic and how and why I believe that magic can teach us actually, that other beings deserve ethical consideration, that other beings are collaborating with us in this universe, shaping us. Latour would talk about this in terms of an actor network theory type of capacity. Karen Barad might talk about assemblages. All of that stuff really, really resonates with me and how I'm describing how I conceive of myself as a witch in the world and how I perceive my collaborations with non-human beings within that context. And so if anyone's curious, I did make a book about it actually. So this is my book, Witchbody. I'm really, really honored that the name of this book seemed to have inspired the title of this panel, Witchbodies. Very, very stoked for that. And I've never actually explicitly explained this before, but for me, like this word that I've come up with, I think I'm the first person to actually kind of combine witch and body together in one word, but it's an obvious kind of play at a lot of these things that I've been talking about. That when we're a body, like the witch's body, let's say, that it's never just singular. There's a phrase that says we can never be a witch alone, and I think that that's true. Oftentimes that is used to invoke a maybe more old school traditionalist form of witchy practice that involves working with a bunch of people in a group context. But for me, it's not about that at all. It's about collaboration with non-human beings, with this interaction of different types of beings, different types of agents with different agencies, actants, co-acting, all of this type of stuff. That's my jam. That's what I talk about here. The book is called Witchbody by me, you guys, Sabrina Scott. So if you want to say hello on Instagram, just as a quick plug, my Instagram handle is Sabrina M. Scott, so say hello. I did draw and write this whole thing, just like a brief plug. But this is actually one thing I want to talk about is that within witchy spaces, a lot of the time folks will talk about the natural. There will be this romanticism of the unaltered organic forms, let's say. There'll be a romanticism of trees and plants and all of that stuff. Don't get me wrong, love trees and plants, awesome. But I do think it's really, really important to extend our ethical consideration, our perception of non-human beings to also include the built environment, to include garbage trucks, to include garbage, to include urban environment and urban landscapes. And so part of the point of writing this book for me, and part of what I was entering into the conversation with this book as a little bit of an intervention, was I would love to see us talk about like ecologies in a bit of a bigger way. there is a documentary where one of my favorite theorists, Zizek, gestures to a lovely pool of garbage. And he says, a true ecologist loves all of this. And I completely am in agreement with that. And so if we're talking about magic and ecology, in my opinion, we also need to be talking about garbage. We need to be talking about skyscrapers. We need to be talking about coffee cups. We need to be talking about these perhaps like less romantic beings that still do have lives, that influence our lives, that co-constitute our lives, that are always in this kind of interaction with us all the time, whether or not we are aware of it, whether or not we want to admit it, whether or not it's as sexy as talking about incense or forest walks or stuff like that. For me, it's all relevant. It's all things to be thinking about, talking about, noticing as people who are interested in magic, witchcraft, ecology, all of this type of stuff. For me, that is like huge. And actually, one more thing I'll say before I move along. So this book, this is one of the original copies. So I did self-publish this in Risograph back in 2015, and it got republished by Wiser Books in 2019. And so the original incarnation of this book, it was very intentionally printed in Risograph. So what is Risograph, you might be asking if you're not a print nerd like me. Risograph is like a mix between a Xerox machine and silkscreen, basically. And so what I really, really love about Risograph is that it never fully dries, like mostly. Like it'll dry like 99%, but it will kind of be a bit tacky and it'll kind of come off like on your fingers a little bit. That's just kind of how it is. And some people see this as like a negative quality of Risograph printing, like, oh no, it's dirty, blah, blah, blah. But for me, I actually love this, and it is a technique and a being that I intentionally decided to work with when I made this book. Why? Because then when you read these original copies, the ink will come off on your fingers, the inky fingers will go back on the book, and so as you read it again and again and again, it will show you, it will reveal your relationship to it, how it has touched you, and how you have in turn touched it. And so I realize that might sound like artsy and philosophical, and maybe it is, but for me that was a really important, like, literal visualization of these relationships that we are always already in. Like, we are always doing that to each other all the time, whether that is, you know, intentionally, consciously, as witchy people, as magic people, as, you know, practitioners in that kind of literal sense, or whether we're just like people in the world. Either way, in my mind, like, we're always kind of in this process of co-constitution, of collaboration. And so for me, a big part of this is really noticing that, drawing our attention to that. And so a lot of the conversation within witchy spaces, and often, you know what, academic spaces as well, is this idea of re-enchantment. Like, oh, we need magic, or magic re-enchants the world. We need to re-enchant the world because the world is not enchanted, it's become disenchanted. And like, that's cute, I guess, but for me, I don't actually feel that way. I don't believe that the world has ever been unenchanted. In my opinion, it's always been enchanted, it's always been magical, it's always been all of this. And what's happened is that many of us, not all of us, but many of us have forgotten how to notice that, have forgotten how to look, have forgotten how to feel, how to see the enchantedness that is all around us all the time. And so when I'm talking about magic, thinking about magic, and I use this phrase in my book, I see magic as a form of reinvigorated presence. Reinvigorated presence. And so for me, this is very, very, very important, because it is distinct from, oh, we need to re-enchant. Because when we're talking about re-enchantment, that's like it's kind of assuming, and it works from the assumption that the problem is with kind of the world out there, let's say. Oh, it's not sexy, it's not enchanted, it's not whatever. Whereas for me, it's always sexy and cool and all of that. The problem is, like, do we have access to our own relationship to noticing, to wonder? Have we lost those ways of sensing? And if we have lost touch with that, how do we re-access that? How do we step into that again? That is a question that I find very, very interesting, and to me, magic is a part of stepping into a more reinvigorated presence. For me, as a lifelong animist, I've never actually experienced this like disenchanted world. Like, I'm very confused to some extent by how anyone can feel that way about existence. Like, there's so much wondrous stuff happening at all times, all over the place. And so I do believe this reinvigorated presence is crucial. And so one aspect of this is that it's about finding magic where we are. It's about being here now. It's not about going elsewhere. It's not about a romanticized other. It's not about departure. It's not about going on holiday. It's not about going on a forest walk a bazillion miles away. It's about, okay, how can we notice that the room, the built environment around us, the tree outside my window, the garbage bin outside my window, the cat lounging in the other room, my own body with its like surgical modifications and all of this, how can we reorient ourselves to noticing the magic and collaboration and co-creation that all of us already are, that our environments already are? And some people confuse me sometimes, or confuse my ideas, and occasionally will interpret what I'm saying as like, screw it, let's just create the most waste. If everything is all equal as you're suggesting, then we don't have any reason to move towards a more sustainable world. That's a complete misunderstanding of what I'm saying. My point is not to say that let's get accelerationist, let's destroy the world because it's all the same anyway. That's not what I'm saying. I do think it is important to work with these ideas and move towards a greater environmental sustainability, stability, all of that. Awesome. At the same time, it would be irresponsible to ignore and demonize the beings that we are sharing this world with. It's here. Garbage is here. How can we relate to it? How can we co-constitute it? How can we change our relationship to that? And many places, many countries already have done this and have certain very specific programs for reusing many of these beings and objects and reconstituting them into other new creative forms, which I think is very, very interesting. So it's not about going anywhere. Yeah, I'm just checking my notes to make sure I'm saying everything that I want to say. But yeah, I am very disturbed by this theme that I do see often within magical community, and it's often also within conservationist community, whether that be through activists or through the academy, because obviously my background is environmental studies, so that is something that I'm thinking a lot about. I don't think it is about this romanticized other. I think it's about changing our relationship to who we are, where we are, all of this stuff. It's not about holding up the natural, whatever the hell that means, on a pedestal and pushing off of a pedestal everything else, everything that we see as impure or like touched by humans, let's say. And so this actually helps me move along to something else that I really wanted to talk about, which is how magic can relate to internal and external ecologies. And obviously this is a false dichotomy that I'm working with here just kind of for the sake of conversation and argument and to not divert into some big sideways discussion about definitions and all of that. That could be very interesting, but maybe we can get into that another time. But I wanted to talk about this internal conception of what magic might be, and also thinking as well about external bodies, perhaps bodies of knowledge, bodies of discourse, bodies of conversation, particularly as we're thinking about the internet and all of this, right? So I do think it is important to not just think about organic ecologies of plants and animals and all of that, which I think is what most of us think about when we think of the word ecology. I would love to just invite us all to expand what we conceive of with this word ecology and what that stirs up for us, how we relate to that. So I do think that it's important as folks who are interested in magic, and I haven't defined it in this video, you will notice, but to me it is very literal, collaborative, co-constitutive process, a process of collaboration, co-creation. That's how I'm seeing magic in this moment. But that being said, I really think it's important to move away from an exaltation of and romanticism of the unaltered by humans framing. Because this idea of the unaltered, the pure, is not really a good road to go down, in my opinion, both philosophically, practically, all of that. And I actually don't even think it's something that exists to be untouched. I think we're always touching each other all the time. Merleau-Ponty talked about this as the flesh of the world. And so if we're all always doing this to each other, our flesh rubbing up against each other, whether it's me to myself, me in this book, me in the wall, all of that, like we're always doing this. And so if we are thinking about things as untouched and pure, and we're just gonna like leave that over there and sequester it to the side, for me that causes a lot of problems and betrays a philosophy that is like not that well thought out, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of other places that we can go instead of to just sequester this fallacy of the pure. I think that is not what magic is about as far as I'm concerned. That being said, on that note, I did want to talk a little bit about this internal magic, something that I think a lot about, and this is a provocation for sure. I'm sure a lot of folks involved in the magical community will be completely appalled that I'm saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway, you guys. I'm thinking a lot these days, and I'll probably write about this moving forward, about forms of internal magic and body as ground, human body as environment for other beings. And so as I'm recording this, right now, there's, the move from a massive vaccination of the world in the middle of the coronavirus global pandemic, total wild bonker situation that we're all in. And so I love the ways that something like a vaccine, let's say, can encourage us to reorient our thinking and our noticing and think about what might it mean to have our body as environment, body as ground, as opposed to us being the actant on another ground. And so we can think about that as a vaccine enters our system and changes us. Is that not a form of magic if we're talking about a mutual collaboration, a co-creation of a body that is us, perhaps a witch body that is us? For myself personally, I also think a lot about something like Botox and facial fillers, which is things that I have in my body at the moment, both for cosmetic reasons and also not so cosmetic reasons. Like I get really bad migraines. It helps with that. There's lots of other reasons that I've decided to engage collaboratively with these beings and work with my own human body as a ground, as an environment for collaboration with these non-human beings as they are literally entering my body to now collaboratively create a body that looks a little bit different. And what that brings up for me is, what are the contours of the body? How is that in many ways permeable? So it's not just the flesh of the skin of the body of our humanness. It's also like, how does that interact with, the food that we're eating? In my case, Botox and fillers. What are the boundaries between my body and those bodies? And at what point do we kind of merge into one? And so when we're thinking about which bodies, that is a lot of the stuff that I'm thinking about and experiencing day to day. And I'm sure all you guys are also experiencing this day to day to some extent with differing levels of awareness. And maybe some of us want to give that meaning, and maybe some of us are just like, no, that's not whatever. That's just kind of life. We don't need to get philosophical about it. But for me, I love to notice these permeable boundaries between beings and the collaboration of beings and the merging into one another of different bodies and beings. And I'm intentionally using the word body here to refer to anything non-human. So within my writing, I talk about like a coffee cup as a body, a cat as a body, a necklace, let's say, as a body, this iPad I'm recording with as a body. All of that is, to me, it creates some opportunities to, as Jane Bennett would say, use anthropomorphism to work against anthropocentrism. And so that is kind of the way that I'm thinking here as I'm speaking in this manner. So that is a big part of how I see things and the philosophy of what I do and witchcraft and how all of this stuff fits together and how bodies figure into that. One more thing I wanted to share and just bring into the consciousness before I let you guys go on this video recording is to think about, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, is moving bodies of knowledge and circulation of bodies of knowledge, virality of bodies of knowledge, particularly with the way the internet has been going in the last few years with the rise of social media. And I'm thinking a lot about the rise of memes, I'm thinking about the rise of the alt-right, and I'm thinking about meme magic, I'm thinking about social media ecologies, and the way that memes as bodies kind of shape and create the discourse and how they act as anchors and like weights that kind of, you know, hoist themselves around and propel certain conversations. And so I'm thinking about that as a form of ecology, as a body of knowledge and knowledges that are always kind of interacting with one another. I have no answers at all about that, what to do about that. But I have been thinking a lot about how did we get here? And to me, how that relates all to magic is all about manifestation. Magic is all about creating the world we want to see. Magic is all about changing ourselves into the person we also want to be, right? It is about an intention and creating reality so that it is in alignment with our intention. And we can get into the specifics of that perhaps another time. I have a lot to say about that. But if we're thinking about the alt-right right now and their rise, and I'm totally a leftist, so please don't confuse my mentioning this as an endorsement of what they're doing. But I do think it is fascinating that they have been able to collaboratively, via social media ecology, to magic their intentions into a very physical, material reality. And in the case that it's like changed the entire conversation globally in a really big way. And I find that as an act of manifestation, as an act of magic, we might say, to be a very interesting thing to think about if we are thinking about magical ecologies as being this kind of collaborative, intention-oriented experience. I just think there's a lot there that we can also work with, think through, all of that. So magic is not just as simple as hippies dancing in the woods without clothes. If only it were. No, just kidding. I would not participate in that. Not my thing. But that being said, I think it would benefit all of us to expand what we think of when we're thinking about magic, to expand what we're thinking of when we're thinking about ecology, and at the same time to not think super literal, only literally, and to also not think only symbolically, because I think there's problems with each. So I should stop talking now. If you're interested in hearing other things that I've got to say, I'm happy to connect with you. On social media is my main way. Instagram is at Sabrina M. Scott at Instagrams, and my email address is sabrinadraws@gmail.com, SabrinaDraws@gmail.com. Website is sabrinamscott.com, and I've got a newsletter, so I say words on the internet everywhere often. So if you want to see more words and wacky thoughts that I have got to say, there are many ways to do that. So thank you so much if you made it through the full end of this video. You're awesome. Thank you. I appreciate you witnessing my babblings and ramblings, and I do believe there is a pedagogy of the rant and the flow, and I think there's a lot of opportunities that can happen when we engage in these type of more informal conversations. So thank you, and thank you again to the folks at CRASSH and to Simone for inviting me. Talk soon, guys. Bye.